Hello and welcome to Healing Tips from the Heart, Intuition with Helpers, Healers, and Guides. I am your host, Dr. Hops, licensed psychologist, writer, and artist. I've explored mind, body, and spirit related to intuition, or your personal guidance system, since early childhood. Meet my guests who have learned from their personal and professional lives to explore vast realms of knowing, synchronicities, and overcoming challenges. Their stories may inspire you with tools to enhance your daily living and relationships. Hello, everyone, and welcome my special guest today, Alina Frank. Alina Frank is an EFT Master Trainer of Trainers. She has trained, mentored, and certified hundreds of practitioners in EFT or emotional freedom techniques, matrix reimprinting, and her own EFT Relationship Coach certification program since 2005. She has been a contributing author in various books on EFT, and has her own book, best-selling author, called Want to Have Sex Again? And during the summer months, you can find her at home growing dahlias, raising chickens, and enjoying island life in the Puget Sound near Seattle. She is also the co-producer of the Science of Tapping film. And hopefully we'll find out more about all of these things. So welcome, Alina.
Hi, Lori. Nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
Very happy to have you. And I'd like people to know that you and I are connected through the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. And I had the great pleasure of interviewing your partner, Craig Weiner. And now I get to spend time with you. So I feel very fortunate today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I love the topic of your podcast. It's really great. I think that not enough people are talking about those themes of heart and intuition and healing.
Yes, and helpers, because I think helpers and guides come in all kinds of forms. Everything from things that are internal to us to external to physical to spiritual. But I know that you have a specialty with relationships. And so I'm wondering if there's something that you'd like to share with the audience about that. And your book sounds very intriguing just by the title alone.
What I want to say that that sex and intimacy didn't come to me as a niche until I was faced with the issue myself. It really is, how sometimes the universe like gives you a whisper, and then when you don't pay attention, it kind of slams you with the cosmic 2x4. And that's what happened to me. I was in a sexless marriage for over 10 years, and I wasn't willing to look at it. I just had these blinders on, and I was trying to, really compartmentalize my life. And this is what I do with people, and I'm congruent with this, and I'll help others with it, but I don't want to look at it in myself. And then I started having one client after another. What would you like to work on? My sexless marriage. What would you like to work on? My sexless marriage. I had 5 in 1 week. And I just sat there. I just lifted my hands in the air and I said, okay, I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. This is something that I really need to work on. And I think that that's the message I want to, I guess I'll start with this. The things that you aren't willing to look at, you're going to be presented with opportunities, whether you want them or not. So why not engage in evolving and exploring and healing, so that you can be a better practitioner, so that you can be your own greatest healer, and kind of avoid those hard lessons that come from, I don't want to see that.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I have so much compassion for you. And I'm sure that there's listeners or viewers who are relating and saying, maybe it's a sexless marriage, maybe it's something else that's really deeply painful,
Yeah.
makes you feel incredibly vulnerable. And you think, oh my goodness, if I take this on, what will become of me? And do I even have the strength to have to unwind pretty much maybe every aspect of my life or things that I know about myself?
Right.
So it's one thing to have 5 clients with all giving you the same issue in your face, but it's another.
In a week.
Yes. Well, I've had things like that happen in a day. Multiple times in my life, not
Yeah.
about that particular issue, but other
Yeah,
ones.
I hear you. Yeah.
But how do you bridge that courageous step to say, okay, I'm ready to maybe even admit it, let alone taking steps?
I
Yeah.
think it's when you're willing to start wherever you are at. And for me, where I was ready to start was with my health. And so that once you open yourself to one area of your life that is it's gotten to the point where you're ready to look at it,
Mm-hmm.
and you see the benefits of the transformation and the healing that happens when you step into that and say, okay, I'm ready for looking at this.
Mm-hmm.
Then you in some way you trust that, okay, this is another area. Obviously, I've had multiple gifts just opening the door to healing in my health arena. Let's look at what would happen, and then working on the fear of looking at it is the first step.
Yeah.
Is what's going to happen? Who am I to do this? Can I really, brought up, Catholic schoolgirl, talk about sex and intimacy to like face that in myself and then out into the community, and all the shame and the guilt and all of those things. But I think the first step is really the fear of what can happen if you do step into that. And for me, the fear was, well, I may end up divorced, which ended up happening.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that, it was the greatest healing and the greatest gift in my life to have that happen when it did. And the same thing that happened with me with healing. So I was able to recognize, like, okay, I understand that I'm afraid here. Let me work on the fear. What's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen, at least for me, it doesn't happen. It didn't happen all by myself. I reached out to people to help facilitate that and hold my hand and say, it's okay, let's just acknowledge what you are feeling, what the fear is there. Let's work with that first.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate, on so many levels for different things in my life, coming out with things that were very vulnerable for me. And one of them being intuitive, because that was seen as being, either you're crazy or you're weird or you're wrong, or worse, if you're any good at it, you're dangerous.
Yes.
So, it's not a direct correlation to what you're talking about, but it's the idea of what could possibly go wrong and the laundry list of what comes out and how it paralyzes you. So I'm so glad that you were able to reach out to other people and create a community for yourself, to negotiate that. Because when we're caught in situations that involve our intimate others, who we would normally go to for support, but it's about our relationship with them.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
tough. That's very isolating.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. And luckily, by the time that happened to me, I was already 5 years into being a practitioner and had a network of friends and hiring practitioners too. It wasn't all just swapping. I knew that I needed to work with people that I would not have a dual relationship with me and could ask me questions directly
Yeah.
without that being a little blurry about, well, I'm friends with you, I'm friends with him, and all those
Yeah.
kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big believer in doing your own work and asking for help when you can't see the forest for the trees because you're so into it, you can't find it, can't
Right.
see it.
So you were able to use the power of energy psychology techniques to help you with your fears and
Hmm.
building the next steps for yourself. Which is
Right.
great, because did it take you a long time I mean, I don't know what a long time means,
Yeah,
but
yeah. No, I think that the long time came in like being oblivious and trying to keep it at bay. That was the long time.
yeah.
Those 10 years was the long time. Once I got to, and you know this, I mean, in your work, these techniques work so quickly.
Yeah.
And it's, I know it's a lot subtle energy, and sometimes it's not like you're just like are slammed with something. But you go through your life and say, wait a minute, I was afraid of that, but I'm taking the next step. Or I didn't want to approach this, but now I feel confident and courageous, and I'm doing it. I'm looking at myself doing these things and taking these steps. And so I asked for a divorce, and I met Craig within a few months of asking for a divorce.
Wow.
And you know, I just felt like really my internal intuitive self was saying, you don't need all this time to go sow your wild oats, or, you know, figure out who you are. You've basically been alone for
Yeah.
the last 10 years figuring that out. You don't have to wait. So that wasn't a belief that I had to go out there and I had to struggle or I had to wait a long time. And so I met him. He asked me to speak at his chiropractic office, and that was it. And it was fascinating because he was presenting me with all the things that had come up in my work when I was doing my like, what do I want to call in? I know that I've healed. I'm still healing from the past. What do I really want to call in? I would get little downloads,
Mhm.
right? Intuition.
Yep.
I would get these little voices that would say things like, you know, the guy that you're going to be with, he has never had children of his own, but he's wonderful with children. And but because of his life circumstances, he's never been able to have kids of his own.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was I had just met Craig. I had just presented at his office. There wasn't butterflies and shooting stars, and like none of that happened. It was just like, wow, how come I haven't met you? We live in a town of 786 people, and I know all the healing arts practitioners. And why haven't we ever met? And it was
Wow.
just, that was the first part of it. It was like speaking at his office and feeling that little bit of, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then right after I presented his office, I was at a children's festival, and he comes behind me, he gives me a hug. I turn around, he's wearing this crazy jester hat. He said, come over to my booth. I have a booth here. And I went over and I watched him interact with kids. My kids were off in another area. And whether it was someone that was in a wheelchair, or developmentally delayed, or a toddler that was 4 years old, or a teenager, he had this little like treasure chest, and he was handing out these little trinkets. And I was watching this in awe, and there was like a lull in the crowd, and I said, you know, Dr. Craig, you really have this gift. And verbatim, Lori, were the words like, yes, I love children. I've always had this deep connection with kids, but because of my life circumstances, I've never been able to have kids of my own. And I just flipped out. I just
Wow.
said, I had a whole body chill, and I
Yeah.
said, oh, okay, this is weird. I need to go now. I will see you later. And I had to leave because I was just so like in that state of knowing, like, wow, what, this is wild. I got that intuitive hit. Here it is in real time,
Yeah.
short, you know, right after meeting him. And I was like, oh, wow, this is fascinating. And I have to just see what happens. I'm open to it now.
Wow, that's so incredible. I just love, it's a delightful story. What you're talking about is just incredible. Um, uh, you're super tuned in, and it really mattered to you to get it right. And so you were given that gift of knowing ahead and recognizing the signs, and you paid attention. And he is open enough that he, without knowing it, said precisely what you needed to hear.
Exactly.
That was a perfect union right there. And I love that you're sharing that you kind of got freaked out and overwhelmed by it. Like it was getting like a blast of intimacy and intensity, and it's almost like too much to handle. I have absolutely been in your shoes with that. And it's like you have to kind of go off and burrow for a bit on your own, and like it's like calm your nervous system and say, oh my goodness, what's happening here? It's like life becomes almost super hyper real
Exactly.
and dreamlike at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I've had those moments where I had one moment where I was I needed to look at certain aspects of my health, and I needed to work on early childhood traumas that had not surfaced yet. And this is like 10 years into all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a download in the middle of the night where I woke up, and then my friend who had passed away a few years before, she was a writer, and she jumped into my lucid dream there and said, wake up, Craig, and tell him to start writing. And I said, okay, Craig, wake up, I need you to write this down. And he wrote 14 pages that I had dictated to him about the connection between my grandmother's sexual injury and why I decided to make this into my niche, about my early childhood traumas, about meeting him. I mean, the whole thing was just surreal. And the next day we were supposed to be teaching together. I had to stay back in where we were staying,
Yeah.
hotel, and just like be in awe. And you just sit there and just go, wow, I am now experiencing like a new self. I
Yeah.
am somebody new, like a newborn in this new reality, having learned all this information and connected the dots of my life story. And I just need to sit and hold and love myself, and like you said, calm your nervous system, and to be able to take all that in, because like day-to-day life is just meaningless. Like, why, I need to just sit and hold space for what is happening.
Beautiful. Wow. How beautiful that you have that connection with him and the trust that you're so plugged in, that you were strong enough to be able to take in all of that information. I go through similar things, different parts of times in my life. Some are more open than others, but it is a lot. And it often happens in the middle of the night, which is not good for early morning rising. So, but wow. And then you can work with it because it's the unpacking process.
Yeah.
So how beautiful that Craig was available to be there for you, and to support you through that.
Yeah.
And
I don't think I would have, had I not heard from my friend who, like I really wasn't very connected to her after she passed, but it came very clear. It was Julie's voice coming in my head that was saying,
yeah,
wake him up. It's okay. Wake him up. He's
yeah,
gonna help you.
yeah. So those who are watching on video, there's a flicker happening with the lighting for me. And so I'm going to turn on a light that makes me look a little yellow, and hopefully that flicker will go away. Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, because it was almost like we were getting a hello from the other side. like a Morse code.
Psychedelic.
Yeah.
Psychedelic glory.
Wow. So how does this help inform you when you work with couples and relationships?
So I don't work with couples anymore. I don't work with clients. I work with practitioners and mentoring and certifying. But when I did, it just gave me a lot of compassion. This is what I pass on to my students, is like, you got to have compassion, and you have to meet people exactly where they are, and deal with the fear and the procrastination and the doubts that come up with really, they're being at their most vulnerable when they're talking about sex, intimacy, and their relationship, and parts of that they've never revealed to another person.
Yeah.
So feel honored and blessed, and hold that as a precious, you're like a precious being, third person in that relationship, that you just got to honor where they are, and feel the enormity of that responsibility and trust, and hold it as sacred.
Yes. Yeah. There's nothing casual about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So it has the intuition part of you always been there? Or did
Um,
it just kind of come up with this crisis of having to negotiate your marriage and relationships?
yeah. So it was there when and I'm sure that this is for a lot of folks, and maybe you can relate, that in childhood, really tuned in and really sensitive, and there was a knowing, and there were things that happened that you could call supernatural. And then, you kind of go to sleep, and your logical part of you, the rational part of you, kind of takes over,
Mhm.
and that goes to sleep. And that really happened to me. And the way that I found EFT was actually, I got letters in my head. I don't tell people this story, Laura. You're getting all the good stuff here. I got letters in my head.
Okay.
EFT. It just showed up in my head, and I
Yeah.
thought, what is this? And then I went to Google, and there was electronic funds transfer. Wait a minute, this can't be it. And I scrolled down further, and it was back in the day where the only source was Gary Craig, the
Right.
founder of EFT. And so I saw that, and I called Gary. I went through his program. I did everything that I could I was just absorbing all of this. But yeah, so that reawakened the intuitive part of me.
Mhm.
And then I went through like some interesting things where I was not accepting of the way intuition came from me. And
Okay.
you hear people say, "Oh, but I don't see things," or
Right. Exactly.
I don't, I hear things and I sense things,
Yeah.
and I don't see things. And I had to get over that, this is the way it was going to show up for me. And I think that's part of becoming a more intuitive person, is accepting that it's showing up, and accepting the way that it is showing up, and being good with that. This is the way it's being presented to me. I'm fine with it. Instead of like beating yourself up that you're not seeing things,
Right.
or some medical intuitors, they feel exactly where it is in the kidney.
Yeah.
That never happened for me. But there was a part at the beginning, like I was beating myself up, like, why can't I be more like that?
Yeah.
And so that blocks it. So accepting the form that it shows up for you is important in reclaiming that part of your intuitive self.
And
So did that happen
recognizing
with
that
you
it
as
is
well? Like, did you have that experience too, as a child, really tuned in and then kind of losing it for a bit?
I've never lost it. It's just a matter of how deep I go.
Yeah.
So I would say that I also didn't recognize how tuned in I was. My grandmother knew. And so she said, it's okay to know, but don't tell anyone. Because she
Oh, wow.
post near Salem, Massachusetts, with the hearing about the history of the witch trials.
Oh,
And
yes.
then she was not always warmly welcome for knowing, let's say, when a woman was pregnant, maybe inside marriage, maybe outside marriage, maybe, there's things that happen. And so she was like, uh-oh, I don't want my granddaughter going through this. So
That's fascinating, because my grandmother was the same thing.
yeah,
She always knew who was pregnant.
yeah,
I had a stillborn before I had my two other children, and my grandmother had a dream of my baby being in a casket, like 3 months before it happened, but never told me. But my grandmother was the same exact way. She always like knew what was going on, even when
yeah,
people.
yeah. And but there's a lot of fear around it. And then the negativity of the predictions rather than the creativity and potential and all of that. But I think the other thing that happens with people is it's so natural and fast. They aren't identifying that they are intuitive. It's naturally inborn to help keep us alive and safe. And the people who are more body-based in their readings of information might be like, oh, I just wanted to walk that direction and then I avoided the car accident. Or I just happened to walk through this door and not that door and ran into my old person who I wanted to see. So they aren't thinking of it as intuition because their body is sort of leading them and it doesn't kind of filter up into the left brain. For you, you have the letters EFT, you have the sound of the words or the idea of the words of, I haven't had the opportunity to have kids, I am blah, 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 the whole thing that Craig said. Right. So you're getting a more language-based communication and it doesn't need to be visual.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But somehow we just have this hierarchy of like, that's better.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. It's like, oh, darn, I don't have blue jeans, I have gray jeans, but you have jeans. So, and it's in our genes. And then, like you said, if we don't pay attention to it and foster it, it's not likely. So if I have the quiet time, and time alone and not so much going on in my life, or I have also alignments with certain times of the year and seasons and also planetary shift. When I was younger, also hormonal shift, and then also need. So if something deep is going on, going through a lot of loss or a very exciting time or a time of complete standstill, or so it feels like you're just itching to make a move or change things. So those things kind of help set the stage for me to kind of go deeper. But I use it all the time. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So I'd love to hear more about your book. Do you have an intuitive story about how that came to be or how it got distributed or something around the book?
So the book is titled How to Want Sex Again.
Yeah.
And the way that it came about was I just felt like I needed to write a book. I wanted to write it on this topic. And an old client of mine is a publisher. And I'm not revealing anything. She's openly said that I helped her with some health conditions. And so I reached out to her and she said, oh, this is fabulous. I wanna get involved. And then I had another client of mine who wanted to help me with it as an editor, and it just all came into alignment pretty quickly and easily. And I know there's some times when we have messages that this is difficult. Maybe it's my intuition telling me not to do it. And I've gotten to the place where I know that that's just a call to look at it more deeply and to do some work on it and see if that's a fear voice that's stopping me. But once you do that, I mean, it's easy. So there might always be like this hesitation, and I see so many people going through like spiritual bypassing. Oh, I'm not meant to do that because it's hard. Well, no, examine what your feelings are first, resolve any conflict internally that you have, and then be open to, all right, it's not the right timing, I get it. Or this is opening up really quickly. Look, I've got this person lining up and this person saying yes, and these things happening to be in the flow of something.
Yeah. I call it blessings and lessons.
Blessings and lessons.
We get blessings and we also get lessons. And people are like, how should I go? Should I go towards this? It feels more like a blessing, or this feels more like a lesson. And it's like, well, all else being equal, you're going to learn either way. Yeah. But if you lean too much into one or the other exclusively, I think that also is a problem.
Yeah.
So that spiritual bypass is, I just want to be in the love and light and, happy and living from like my upper chakras. intuitive knowing and the crown with the spirit and maybe the heart and the communication, but like, let's not talk like below the belly button or,
Right.
or below the heart or
Right.
the ground or the, the messiness,
Right.
we're born in blood,
Yeah.
and when we die, there's a disintegration. There's a lot of shadow and muck,
Yeah.
not necessarily heaviness. I mean,
Right.
it could be. So I like that you were like, oh, this is my thing now. Let's explore.
Right. 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 And I think that's important for um attracting your right partner as well, because sometimes people are presented to us in our life's journey that we learn lessons from, and they're not necessarily meant to be our romantic partner
Yeah.
for life. And so healing those healing those relationships, and that and where the early childhood stuff with your parents and the relationship that you had with them and how they loved you and all of that is really important, or you're going to be attracting people that you're going to be working out lessons with in a much more painful way.
Yeah.
Such as like the compulsion to repeat the trauma. Here you are with someone that you thought was one way, and then you're in the relationship and turns out they're very different. I can't tell you how many clients I had who said, I swore I would never marry my father, or I swore I would never marry an alcoholic, and boom, that happened. And yeah, it's just that happens. And the other thing that I've seen happen is sometimes someone is presented to us, and there's so much synchronicity and intuition that happens when you're meeting, that you aren't evaluating the other things, and it might be a karmic debt that you're working out with that
Yeah.
person, right? So I left you in a past life, and you're gonna leave me in this one. So it's so maybe better to hold back as much as possible. I know it's hard these days because the way that people are just into being intimate right away.
Yeah.
But I say hold off on that piece, because then there's so much that's connected chemically, hormonally,
Yeah.
karmically, and chakra wise.
Yeah.
You are merged with this person when you have sex, and you have a much more difficult um it's just going to be much more difficult to then be discerning about, wow, those behaviors are showing up. Oh, I'm not seeing it because of all of this stuff, other stuff that's happening energetically and hormonally, that I'm not able to separate that. So if that happens where you're like, wow, that's interesting, you grew up in the same town I did, and we went to the same school,
Yeah.
and we have all of these interesting life experiences, let me hold off on being sexually connected to you.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to work out my karmic debt and drama with you as a friend, and not being so painful.
And not only do you get is there a thick veil between that truth and your lived experience, but also it's harder to extricate yourself
Yeah.
and step back when you're already invested in this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a similar story to yours. There weren't 700 people, but my husband and I grew up together without knowing each other.
Wow.
And there was so many, and in fact, even our siblings were connected and our parents were connected, and we had friends in common, and we went to the same schools, and we did not meet until it was time to meet, until we were adults.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So yeah, it's very strange. It's like, how many times was there a whoops moment when, I kind of think of like, if there was like, if you were writing a script for a novel or a film, and you'd be like, no, don't turn this way, you're going to run into each other, not yet. It has to wait for this date. So when you're meant, well, there's as much of a pull towards sometimes as there is a push away, that magnetics, so it's kind of interesting how we both have that same kind of
Yeah.
dynamic.
I
But
I love that. I love that story.
yeah,
And it's the master chessboard play,
yep,
it's like controlling it, like, okay, you're not. We figured out that if we had met sooner, he would have ended up being friends with my ex-husband because
oh,
they had so many things in common.
uh-huh,
And and he and he would have never crossed that line, even if he,
uh-huh.
we'd all been friends, then he would have never crossed that line of asking me out because he would have been friends with my ex. So it was perfect.
Yep,
It was divine for sure.
yep, yep, yeah. It's kind of crazy how things happen and how things don't happen.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Wow. So I feel like I kind of jumped into the rabbit hole, down the
Yeah.
rabbit hole with you today. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing some of these
Yeah.
personal stories that I think people find interesting to listen to and intriguing, but it
Mhm.
also gives them pause to look back on their life and say, huh, and then maybe also have some clues about how to move forward and to not dismiss some of these quick, subtle hits that we get, teasers about life. But is there anything else that you'd like to share with people about your story or helpers, healers, and guides, or anything from the heart?
I was thinking about the topic of your show, and one of the questions that you had me think about ahead of time was, what was the best advice that you ever got?
Mhm.
Um, and so I was at a conference, and I was watching this presenter, and it felt like she was talking directly to me when
Mm.
she said, would you like your children to be living the life that you're leading?
Oh, wow.
And that planted the seed, and then months later is when I had my awakening of like, oh my gosh, I have to look at my sex life and my current relationship. So that planted the seed. And then years later she came to a workshop that I was giving, and
Mm.
I was able to afterwards buy her a drink, and I said, you changed the course of my life by asking me that question. And I hadn't said what question. I just said, you asked a very provocative question that just hit me like right in the center.
Yeah.
And I felt it in my heart when you asked it. And she said, I know which one it is. It's about your children. And I just yeah, absolutely. It's the one I get the most response from. And I think that look for those people that are in your life, that are presented to you along your path, that ask you questions that's that are uncomfortable,
Mhm.
and or hit you right in your heart, make you think, make you inquire about yourself and what you're doing. And yeah, I think be open to it. Be open to that.
Beautiful. What a powerful question.
Yeah.
And how beautiful that you paid attention to your visceral experience of how it hit you and that it opened the door. It's like it was like a shock to the
It was.
system.
Yeah.
Say, are you going to get real?
Yeah. Exactly.
How real do you want to get?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, thankfully, I've had people like that in my life, and possibly I've shared that kind of teaching with others too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
oh my goodness. Well, fortunately for you and your family, you did say yes to the difficult road, but the rewarding one. Yeah, and didn't stay stuck
Absolutely.
in what was maybe a default.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And being, one of the first people in my family, extended family, to get divorced,
Oh
and
my.
and all of those things. And the question for me was, okay, I want them to see an experience of having me be happy in a
Mm.
relationship. And so, and now, hindsight, my kids are adults, and they acknowledge that. They acknowledge the beauty in my relationship and having another person come in to also help parent them. So yeah, thanks. You're a great interviewer because I felt so relaxed. I could share all of this with with your audience. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course we will review this before publishing. So if there's anything you're uncomfortable with later.
Okay.
But yeah, it's interesting because Craig, your partner, we titled his talk "Wake Up Calls."
Oh, that's great.
Talks about wake up calls that have happened to him and the twists and turns of his life. And we just started releasing the first 3 episodes, and it's getting some really great feedback from people. So I know yours is going to be similar. So if anyone wants to know more about the other side to this partnership, tune into Craig Wiener's talk on wake up calls as well. Oh, thank you so much for being present and sharing your authentic self and giving me the chance to kind of get a peek into some of what makes you unique and vital. I so appreciate it.
Thank you. And thanks for having this podcast. It's so needed.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website for podcast and resources at hopshealingtips.com. You can also like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and is not providing healthcare advice. Please seek guidance from your professional healthcare team should you need assistance.